Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's April 29th, 2021 Audit Committee meeting. We
have to.
currently
Sorry,
are...
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
We may have to take a recess because I think one member dropped off the WebEx.
Some technical difficulties?
Yeah.
Okay, so we will take a brief recess. Let's just call it until 2:10, and hopefully we can get him back on the line, and then we will resume the meeting.
All right.
Some technical difficulties?
Yeah.
Okay, so we will take a brief recess. Let's just call it until 2:10, and
Okay, thank you.
okay, good afternoon, and welcome back to the April 29th, 2021 City of Glendale Audit Committee. Roll call, please.
Audit Committee Member Ed Kashadorian,
Here.
Tom O'Shaughnessy, Alex Parajon, Vahik Saturian is absent, and Chair Zara Emirian.
I'm here. Did we get an affirmative from Mr. Parhon?
I think
No.
he's
Mr. Chair, there's a message I think on Mr. Parahon's. Oh, it disappeared. Something about like low bandwidth or something.
Okay. Okay,
And he's muted.
we have two of him right now, I think.
I'm here.
Okay.
okay. There we go. Thank you, Mr. Parhon. Item number 2, please.
Item number 2, Business Agenda. Report of Recording Secretary regarding posting of agenda. The agenda for the April 29th, 2021 Audit Committee meeting was posted on April 26th, 2021 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. Oral communications?
Item number 3, Oral Communications. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 3 minutes. The committee may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The Audit Committee meeting chair may refer the matter to staff for investigation and report.
Do we have any calls at the moment?
No, we don't have.
In terms of oral communications, we'll keep that availability open. I can move that item around if we do get a member of the public calling. For public comments and questions during the meeting, you can call 818-937-8100. And we love to hear from the community. Item number 4, please.
Item number 4, approval of minutes. Minutes of the Audit Committee meeting held on January 28th, 2021.
Moving to approve.
Second.
Unfortunately, Mr. Parahone, I believe you were absent.
Mr. Chair, he can second the motion, and if he has viewed the meeting online and can attest to the accuracy and the completeness of the minutes, he can also vote on it.
Excellent. Do we need to ensure that he's done that?
He can speak to it.
Excellent. Mr. Parahone, are you able to do as Ms. Varabetian suggested in terms of the minutes?
Oh,
Mr. Parahone?
I think he's still here.
It looks like we're having some technical difficulties with committee member Parahone. Ms. Varabetian, what do you suggest we do at this point, considering that we're having some technical difficulties and we are hovering in and out of a quorum?
We should, Mr. Chair, we should perhaps take another recess, speak with Mr. Parahone over the phone, see if we're able to resolve the issue. If we are, then we can move forward. If we're not, then we can perhaps come back on a special meeting on another day.
Excellent.
I'm here, actually, guys.
Okay.
Oh,
I switched to my iPad because somehow I'm having issues with my laptop.
Okay.
Okay.
So, Mr. Parahone, if you can speak to the fact, even though you were absent, that you viewed the meeting and looked over the notes and can attest to their accuracy, we should be able to have these minutes.
I don't recall
approved.
being absent in that meeting, guys. I'm not sure why I was recorded absent.
Okay. Then we need to correct that, perhaps.
This was the meeting in January, wasn't it?
The January 28th. Yeah.
Yeah, I was there.
I remember
that
you
is
being there
true.
as well.
Yeah, I was. I don't think I've ever missed a meeting, so yeah.
Oh, okay.
We need to
Okay.
correct that.
So
do I need to take back the motion or?
No, you're good. You know what? It appears I misread the manner in which the minutes were written. It had 3 names on one line and then 2 names followed by an absent on the other. So I'll take accountability for that snafu. So we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Audit Committee Member Ed Kashadurian,
Yes.
Tom O'Shaughnessy and Vahik Taturian are absent. Alex Parahone
Yes.
and Chair Zaria Amirian.
Yes. Okay. That was the most dramatic approval of minutes that we've gone through as an audit committee. Let's move on to item number 5.
Item number 5, action items.
There are no action items. Item number 6, please.
Item number 6, reports and information. Internal audit activity report as of March 31st, 2021. Jessie Jung, Internal Audit Manager.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and
afternoon.
Audit Committee members. My name is Jessie Zhang, Internal Audit Manager. This afternoon, I would like to provide you a report on the internal audit activities for the quarter ended March 31st, 2021. As outlined at the beginning of the activity report, there are a total 7 sections that provide a summary of what internal audit has completed in the past quarter. I will go over these sections one by one. First section is project completed. During this past quarter, internal audit team has completed 4 projects. One of them, the fuel purchase contract audit, was issued under attorney-client privilege as recommended by the City Attorney's Office. So this afternoon, we'll present the first 3 listed within the completed projects table. we have distributed these reports to you when they were issued. So these reports are actually also available on the city's website. The first presentation we have prepared for you today is the Express Risk Survey on fraud risk. We perform Express Risk Survey in between annual risk assessments, and two main purposes for conducting this type of survey. It is a risk assessment tool, and it's also an educational tool that we utilize to assist the city in identifying, assessing, and addressing its risks related to any new and emerging risks and hot topics. So the fraud risk checkup is completed by our senior internal auditor, Natalie Minami Valdivia. So Natalie, you may start your presentation when you're ready.
Thank you.
Just a quick reminder, because most of the attendees are joining the meeting via WebEx, we would greatly appreciate it if you could please wait till the end of the presentation to ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Minami Valdivia.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chair Marion and Audit Committee members. My name is Natalie Minami Valdivia, and I'm a Senior Internal Auditor within the Internal Audit Division. Today, I will be presenting to you the Express Risk Survey Fraud Prevention Checkup that we completed last quarter. So let's start off by defining fraud. What is fraud? Fraud is the intentional misrepresentation of the truth or the concealment of a material fact to deprive another of property or money. Why do people commit fraud? According to Donald Cressy, a renowned American sociologist and criminologist, and his fraud triangle theory, fraud occurs when three factors of opportunity, pressure, and rationalization are present. So opportunity may be provided by a weak internal control system, poor security over company property, little fear of exposure and likelihood of detection, or unclear policies with regard to acceptable behavior. Pressure may result from a person's financial need or simply from a person's greed. Rationalization, the last factor, may include a person's belief that committing the fraudulent action is necessary, harmless, and/or justified. As an example, let's take a look at how the COVID-19 pandemic has increased the risk of fraud in each of these three factors. Opportunities may have increased with a shift in focus to operational measures rather than compliance and due to staffing shortages resulting from illness. The pressures or financial needs may have increased due to job loss and employees' inability to pay their rent or mortgage, or an unexpected increase in an employee or their family's medical bills. Rationalizations may have also increased due to including employees that feel the staffing shortage will prevent them from being caught, or that committing the fraud is necessary to provide for or protect their families. So to provide some background, we performed research to identify the mitigation measures that the city already has in place. Let's take a look at these mitigation measures. The first one is the Employee Code of Ethics. The Employee Code of Ethics includes the 10 core values of excellence, integrity, honesty, truth, fairness, teamwork, respect, accountability, compassion, and cultural awareness. It also includes 5 guiding principles of ethical conduct that include acting with integrity, being fair and impartial, conducting government openly, efficiently, equitably, and honorably, providing superior service, and safeguarding public confidence. The second one is a fraud, waste, and abuse policy that defines expectations, responsibilities, reporting, investigation, and enforcement, and disciplinary actions. The third is an employee hotline that is managed by an independent employee hotline reporting service. This hotline is staffed 24/7 and is intended to allow employees to anonymously report suspected fraud, waste, and abuse. The purposes of this survey were to perform a fraud risk assessment, raise awareness related to the potential fraud risks, and assist the city and its departments to identify, assess, and address its fraud-related risks. The scope of the survey included the 15 city department directors, and the survey period was from February 3rd to February 23rd, 2021. Responses were received from all 15 city departments. It is important to note that internal audit compiled the responses received without any additional validation. To accomplish our objective, we researched best practices. We developed a 10-question survey. We distributed the survey to the 15 city departments for completion. We downloaded the department survey responses received into our automated spreadsheet template, and then we provided each department with a custom departmental risk assessment with mitigation tools to reduce the identified risks. The Excel template created provides a drop-down menu that allows the auditor to select a survey number that automatically populates the department report based upon the available express risk survey data submitted. We then provided the department summary report and the list of the risks and mitigating factors to be used as an educational tool to reduce the identified risks. Once the department responses were all received, internal audit compiled a summary report that was provided to the city management. The report included the overall risk score by city department. The overall average risk score by city department chart shows the risk assessment result based upon the average city department risk score. The results show 10 departments were categorized as low risk and 5 departments were categorized as medium risk. The average risk score was 1.4, with the lowest being 1 and the highest 2. The citywide risk score by risk survey question is calculated as the sum of the individual department risk scores. The color indicates the related risk level. The survey questions that received a score of 15 or less were categorized as low risk and represented in green. Scores from 16 to 30 were categorized as medium risk and are represented in yellow. And if there had been any scores greater than 30, they would have been categorized as high risk and would have been represented in red. For the 10 questions asked, there was 1 categorized as low risk, 9 as medium risk, and 0 as high risk. The citywide risk score by risk survey question is calculated as the sum of the individual department risk scores. The color indicates the related risk level. The survey questions that received a score of 15 or less were categorized as low risk and are represented in green. Oh. I'm sorry. Scores from 16 to 30 were categorized as medium risk and are represented in yellow. And if there had been scores greater than 30, they would have been represented in red. The next steps, we recommend that management address the higher risk areas with mitigating controls and continue to assess and reassess fraud-related risks and respond appropriately. Examples of mitigating factors that could be implemented include the city promoting fraud awareness amongst its employees by establishing a formal fraud awareness training program that includes informing employees of the available reporting system and educating them on the fraud triangle, fraud warning signs, and prevention techniques. It can also promote education through its participation in the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners International Fraud Awareness Week, which this year will be November 15th through the 21st, by encouraging City Council to issue a proclamation declaring the city's support of Fraud Awareness Week and educating the public on the ways to report potential fraud, waste, and abuse through the use of social media. As fraud prevention is a continuous process, the city may continue to reduce its fraud risks with the implementation of the mitigating factors provided. This completes my presentation. I'd like to recognize and thank each department and ISD's Dave Whiting for their assistance through the fraud prevention checkup survey process. Deputy City Manager John Toctalian and I are here to answer any questions that you may have.
Excellent, thank you. I will open it up to questions from our committee members.
Chair Amirian, this is Ed Kashadurian. I just would like to ask one question. I think, yes, thank you. In the beginning of your presentation, Ms. Minami Valdez, and thank you very much for this presentation. Sorry, Ms. Minami Valdivia, I apologize. If you go back to the beginning of the presentation, there is one of the slides that I think shows the 3 methods of reporting fraud. I did not see anything related to the public directly being able to report fraud. I'm sure there's a process. Could you just maybe help us understand what that process is?
So
Um,
currently, I'm sorry.
I think it was on slide number 4, if I'm not wrong, or maybe I am. I'm not exactly sure. 4 or 5. Oh, yep, there, right there. 4. So, yes.
So this employee hotline is available on the city's intranet, and it's to the city employees, but it is also available on the IPA website on the external side. And there are also several other ways that people may report any fraud or any city issues. There's several phone lines that they may call that are also available on the city website.
I show.
Okay, so there's just a website and a phone number for people to contact and report, cases
Should I
that
show the
are
website?
suspicious, or?
It's basically any questions that you might have for the city. So it would be covered under other. So they would be able to report under other, either via the city's internet or by phone.
Okay, so it's a similar process, basically.
Yes, the only difference that I'm aware of is that it doesn't go, if you call the city directly, they may direct you to the employee hotline, which is an anonymous line, versus if you call directly or submit through the internet, it may not be anonymous.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just wanted to add to that. I don't know if you can see. I'm going to show where the hotline is. So if you go to City of Glendale website, go to Innovation, Performance, and Audit, and click on Audit. And right underneath Audit Committee is where on our website, on our website page, the fraud hotline is. This is the number right here.
Are you actually showing it right now, or?
Oh, can you see it? Oh, yeah, I will have to share my screen. Hold on. This one. So, let me do it again, go back. So this is the City of Glendale website. Then you go to the IPA department. Under Audit. So you go down right underneath the Audit Committee tab. So here, this is the hotline number.
Oh, could you do me a favor? Could you just type in the search area reporting fraud or something? I'm just trying to see how easy it is to find that information.
Search
On the
Like, I
City
don't
of
know,
Glendale
reporting
website?
fraud or
City of
something.
Glendale website, right? So I'll go back to, this is IPA. So right
Yeah.
here,
Mm-hmm. Up top.
hotline. Right here.
Okay.
So this one actually have some color.
So that's the same number?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. Mr. Kashduran, did you have any other questions regarding that?
No, thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay. Mr. Parahon?
Actually good, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I have a couple questions. So each of the city departments, who actually was answering the survey? Was it just the department
The
head?
department, yes, for the most part, they were sent out to the department executives and, well, yes, they were sent out to the department executives.
Okay. And then were there were there any, I'm curious kind of what the directions were to the department heads. Were they answering those questions just based upon, the knowledge that they had at the time, or did they survey their team members? How did that work?
I believe that it was based on their information at the time. So they were answering for their department as a whole.
Okay. And then the scoring scale, could you just describe that in a little bit more detail on how you established that scoring scale? And maybe give an example of one of the questions, like question number 3, for example, and how that was scored?
Sure. Let me share my screen one more time. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
So we prepared a slide just in case you might ask that question. So we had, for each risk question, they had 3 options. They had the option of answering yes, no, or not sure. So if they answered yes, they received 1 point. If they answered no or not sure, they received 3 points. Then we have the mitigating control. So we ask you if you have that risk, if that risk is present. And then the mitigating control, if you answered no or not sure to the first question, but you implemented 1 or more of the mitigating controls, then we deducted a point. So it was a negative 1 point. And then if you answered no or not sure to part 1, but you didn't implement any of the mitigating controls, you got 0 points for the mitigating control portion. And if you answered yes to part 1, you also received 0. So basically the rationale is that you can't receive a score lower than 1, and you cannot have a risk rating lower than low. So then you can see in the example, we use number 1 as the example. So if the risk was no or not sure, it was 3. And then if you had the mitigating control implemented, you got a -1 and you received a complete score of 2, or a total score of 2.
Got it. So I'm looking at 1. So there were 15 yeses on the risk question. So that was the minimum score of 15, correct?
Correct.
And then how do the responses in 1A, just as an example, modify that score? Or does it modify that
So
score?
if they all answered yes for number 1, it wouldn't modify the score at all because they're already at the lowest risk level.
Got it. So you basically just assigned all of the yeses in 1A -1, and then all of the no's you assigned a 3, and then you added that to 15?
So if everyone answered yes, or if they answered that yes to number 1, then they got the score of 15. So we didn't reduce, even if they had a mitigating control, they were calculated as 0, again, because it was the lowest score. Because you can't get below a 1 or 1 times the 15. 15 is the minimum score citywide.
Right. But I mean, looking at like 1A, employees are periodically surveyed to determine the extent to which they believe management acts with honesty and integrity. There were 2 yeses and 13 no's. So was there 37 points subtracted because of that question?
No, because those were ranked as 0. You're looking specifically just at question 1, correct?
Yeah, I'm just using an example. I'm just trying to understand the scoring and just get an idea so that the public can understand the methodology behind the scoring.
So when you're looking at the department scoring was the aggregate scores of each of the departments.
Okay. Okay.
These are, let me see.
Ms. Young?
Hold on. Let me see if there's a appendix that has that information.
Appendix B, thank you. Let me take a look here. So Appendix B, we have citywide survey results by question. Yeah, so I'm asking about Appendix B, for example, that the matrix represents the citywide survey results by question. I'm trying to understand how that scoring resulted in question number 1 having like the score that it has. Does that make sense?
So, yes, we showed the total, even though they didn't necessarily affect the scoring, because if you answered question number 1, you still have the ability to answer 1A. So again, because they have the minimum score as a yes, there weren't any points assigned to anything in 1A. They were just accumulated so that we to
Got it.
show what the city has implemented or how many of the departments have implemented each of the controls.
Okay, so the scores in the detailed risk assessment results, the total risk score represents the answers to the risk question unmodified by any of the mitigating control questions.
They are actually modified by the mitigating control if the answer was no or not sure. So if they don't already have the lowest score available. So for example, in the example that's on screen, if you answered no or not sure and you received a score of 3 and you had a mitigating control of yes, you answered 1 or more of the mitigating control questions as yes, your score was reduced by 1. So the score for your department would be 2.
Okay, okay.
So it was scored individually by department and then aggregated. So that's how they would be.
Got it.
reflected
So,
within
so,
the final
you know, the points were only added for the risk question. On the mitigating control part, a yes got you a -1, a no or not sure wasn't scored at all.
Correct.
Okay,
Well,
thank you.
the mitigating control was a checkbox. You either had it or you didn't have it. There were a series of check questions. There were a series of check boxes next to each item. So you either checked it or you didn't check it.
Okay. And then are there any, you know, based upon the survey results, does audit have any recommendations as to what, you know, as a result of the surveys, what actions, if any, need to be taken?
Yes, our recommendations were that they take a look at the highest risk, the ones that were rated with the highest risks, and to address them and to implement some of those checkboxes that were included within the mitigating factors. So those included the training program, which IPA is currently working on, and will roll that out citywide in the future. So it's basically educating our employees on what fraud is and how to identify it and how to address it, as well as how they can report it.
Excellent. And then is there any thought to potentially surveying a larger group than just the directors of the departments?
It's interesting that you asked that question. Actually, one of the directors asked us or told us that, oh, you know, this is great. I will actually send it to my managers, you know, to answer them. So like I said earlier, this is a risk assessment tool. This is also an educational tool. So it's, you know, to raise awareness of what are the risks, fraud risks, and what are the mitigation factors that you could consider to reduce that risk. So that's kind of, to me, a very positive feedback from one of the directors.
Yeah, and I would be curious as to how a larger sampling of employees in each of the departments would answer these questions. Especially if there can be assurance that the answers would be anonymous. I think it would be an interesting exercise to compare how the employees' responses compare to the department manager's responses.
Yes, I think the step one will be to have a citywide fraud awareness training. And then after that, I think next step, I hope after the training and then the employee will be more alert or, have a lookout for those red flags. And then, we'll go from there.
Excellent. Thank you. If we have no further questions, let's move on to the next report.
Chair Miriam, may I ask a quick question?
Mr.
Or actually make
Khachdurian,
a
of
comment?
course.
Yes, listening to what the conversation that you had with Ms. Valdivia and the committee, it just crossed my mind to ask this question, and that is, how did you create this survey, or did you take it from someplace else? Like, I guess what I'm asking is that, is this a validated survey? I'm asking this because, especially with respect to the way you're scoring these questions, there might be some issues there, and if it's a validated survey, it's a different story. And this is probably not very important, but since Ms. Zhang just mentioned about the training or citywide training, I think if you want to implement this as a training tool, maybe it would be better to take another look at the way the questions are asked, and there might be some moral hazard issues, things of that nature. It is worth looking at it if there's going to be a step number 2 to this activity.
Yeah, let me answer the second part of your question. This it will not be, will not be, but this is not the training material. So then when we say a citywide training, it's going to be, we'll recreate a whole set of training material. Did I mention that? But maybe I don't remember. So IPA has done some research, and basically, part of the research is to create some scenarios, and then to create some quiz questions, true and false questions. So that's going to be not going to be the same as this one. But for us, for this risk assessment survey questions, we have done a lot of research on what kind of questions we should ask, and we referenced the fraud examiner website. They have a fraud risk checkup, so some of the questions are taken from that website. What's the website called? Fraud exam. Do you remember, Natalie?
And looking really quickly, the
The-
certified fraud examiners. First word is this.
Yeah, that's the certificate you can get from that organization. But what's the website called? We'll think about it.
Yeah,
We'll-
and I
We'll
think
come
if you
back
provide
to
that.
ACFE website.
Excuse me, Ms. Manami Valdivia?
Mhm.
Yeah,
What's the website?
I believe it was off the ACFE website.
Can you spell it out? Or let me just search.
But I believe it is ACFE. If you go to the acfe.com, it's the
Association of Certified
Examiners.
Fraud Examiners.
Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. Thank you. Mr. Khachdurian, does that answer your question?
Sure, yes. I basically raised the question because I thought that this was going to be a survey that was going to be implemented across all departments and all employees. So yeah, if this is not going to be the issue, then yeah, clearly answers my question. Thank you.
And
I
think
still have some reservations regarding the scoring. So for example, you put a question, you answer no or not sure, both get the same answer, the same score. That's I guess a question, but it's not really material at this point.
yeah,
We assumed that the no and not sure were the same, and then they had the ability to improve their score by, if they're not sure whether they have that particular risk, then they go back down to question 1A or the A supplement question, and they can check mark specific examples. So if they're not sure, we would deduct a point if they did actually implement something that was related to the risk we were addressing.
thank
Yes,
you.
thank you.
Yeah, and Mr. Khachaturian, I'm on the same page as you in terms of as a tool for the city to determine that there needs to be a specific fraud, risk, and abuse training for the employees. I think this survey was great. And then after that training, if the determination is made that it might be beneficial to have a survey done of a wider swath of the employees, in that case, I tend to agree with you that we should probably look very closely at the methodology of the survey to ensure that we're getting not only the best answers possible to the best questions, but those answers are frank and also weighted in such a way that gives city management a really good idea of where the employees evaluate risk of fraud in the city. Okay, let's move on to the next report. Thank you, Ms. Manami Valdivia.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for all the good questions. Will help us improve in the future. So the next, I would like to introduce our Senior Internal Auditor, Samil Salim, to present the 2 projects that he has completed this past quarter. So the first one is the Dell Contract Compliance Audit, and followed by the Pci Compliance Audit. Just a quick note on the Pci Compliance Audit. You have heard about this presentation in the past, but it is a reoccurring audit that we perform 3 times a year in March, June, and September. So I think it will be a good refresher to have Samil present this again. And also, he will cover the result from the most recent audit performed in March. So Samil, you may start when you're ready.
Okay.
Mr.
Hi,
Salim?
everybody. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to share my screen. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, good afternoon, Chair Marian and fellow Audit Committee members. My name is Samil Salim, and today I'm going to be going over the findings from my Dell Contract Compliance Audit. So the Dell contract is a cooperative agreement, and I don't know if you recall, back in 2019, I did a cooperative agreement audit that covered the cooperative agreement in general, and I talked about the potential benefits and potential risk involved with them. And so the Dell is a specific example of a cooperative agreement. And a cooperative agreement, just to refresh, is just essentially a contract for a goods and service between 2 parties, the buyer and the seller. The difference between this and any other agreement is that it contains a piggybacking clause, which allows outside parties outside of the A and B initial contract to piggyback off that contract and take advantage of it without undergoing their own bid process to get the goods or services. And one of the main concepts involved in this is the the issue of lowest price versus best value. The city of Glendale, generally, when we get our goods and services, we bid it out, we evaluate the bids, and then we award the bid for the goods and service to the qualified vendor with the lowest price. That's how we typically do it. With cooperative agreements, they tend to award their contracts using a criteria called best value. And so best value is a subjective scorecard, essentially, in which price is one of the many factors that are taken into account when awarding these contracts. So being that price is not the main criteria, you may in fact be getting goods and services at a higher price than what we might be able to get using our traditional bid process. So that's the risk. The benefit is obviously that you don't have to undergo that bid process and can get the things you need quickly. So that in a nutshell is what cooperative agreements are. With that, I'll jump straight into our Dell cooperative agreement. So like I mentioned, this was also awarded using the best value criteria. And when we enter the agreement, what it allows us is access to their Dell Premier website. The Dell Premier website is essentially the same as when you go to Dell.com as a consumer and go to purchase your thing. It looks almost identical. You could search for your different models. You could build a cart. You could print out that cart for a quote, and then you could check out putting your payment information. So for our purposes, it's the same like the consumer website. The difference is that it's supposed to guarantee a minimum discounts off retail prices. So it's supposed to offer lower prices than the consumer website. And there's also a clause in the cooperative agreement that allows for negotiation for further discounts. So obviously, if you're buying one laptop versus if you're buying 200,000 laptops, the 200,000 scenario, you could further negotiate additional discounts in addition to the minimum discounts that the Premier website already affords. The contract summary. It was initiated, we created the contract back in October 15. Initially, it was a 3-year term, but through extensions, it's currently renewed through June 2021. And for our audit period, which was January 1, 2020 through September 30th, 2020, there was approximately $666,000 of purchases made. And the types of purchases made from there are monitors, laptops, desktops, and tablets. That accounts for the vast majority of the purchases we make from them. So how was this cooperative agreement created initially? So the lead agency was the state of Minnesota. So they decided one day, we're going to create a national cooperative agreement for IT services that could be used nationwide by agencies. So they put together their request for proposal, their RFP documentation, and sent it out to the world basically to respond. And then there were over 30 responses to the RFP, and these are just some of the companies that responded, that actually did respond to the RFP. So they got their responses, and then using that best value criteria, they scored each response to give each company an overall score, and then they awarded their contracts accordingly, which Dell was one of the winning bidders. The interesting thing about this one is that in addition to Dell, they actually awarded almost everybody who responded, they awarded a contract to. I don't know what the intent was for the state of Minnesota, and I'm not commenting on their intent, but one of the benefits for a lead agency to create a cooperative agreement is there's a small administrative fee that's collective of total purchases made from the contract. So the larger the pie, that small slice, 1%, for example, let's say, that they get of total purchases, the bigger the pie you make, the more you could bring in. I'm not saying that's why they did it, but that is one of the benefits for a lead agency to create it. But we're just going to stick to Dell since that's what we're talking about. So they awarded Dell a contract. So now Minnesota and Dell have a national cooperative agreement contract that can be used nationwide by agencies. So the city of Glendale then has a need for Dell equipment, and so what we do is we entered agreement with Dell. So now the city of Glendale and Dell have their own contract, but in that contract it specifies the cooperative agreement that Minnesota created with Dell. So that serves as a backbone of the contract, the terms and agreements that Minnesota and Dell initially came up with. That's what binds our contract as well. And then once we have our signed contract, we go ahead and buy the goods and services. Just real quick. So then what this allows us to do, obviously, is to forego the first five steps, meaning the RFP, the bid process, the evaluation, and the ultimate contract, and we could just jump right in. So that's fairly obvious, but thought I would point it out. Now to the specifics of our audit, the objectives and scope. The objective was to see if the Dell contract and associated purchase orders are appropriately administered, invoices are processed in accordance with contract and purchase order terms, and that everything was recorded in an accurate manner. The scope, as I mentioned before, was January 1, 2020 to September 30th, 2020. The audit process, we conducted interviews with Dell, with our own internal ISD, Information Services Department, Finance. We reviewed Dell contract documents, including the underlying RFP documents and the cooperative agreement. And we performed detailed test work, your invoice testing, making sure everything was recorded accurately, things of that nature. What we also did, which was interesting, was we tried to assess, okay, does this cooperative agreement actually give us preferential pricing? So how I did that was I compared the pricing so this was back in 2020, our scope period. So all those models are outdated. So what I did is I tried to find equivalent models for the current period, and then I checked prices from the Dell Premier website, the Dell Consumer website, and then another third-party Dell reseller. So those are the three data points of how I kind of tried to assess, okay, how is the pricing that's being offered? And then the summary of audit results. The Dell purchases were generally adequately supported and approved. It wasn't conclusive whether using the Dell cooperative agreement will always result in lower prices. And I'll expand on this a little bit. So when compared to the Dell Premier, when compared to the consumer website, the prices were lower across the board, which was good. So the cooperative agreement does appear to provide lower pricing than what your average consumer could get for the same products, which is good. But when compared to the another third-party Dell reseller, the results were mixed. In some instances, they were better, in others, they were higher. So it wasn't consistent, so we can't draw a definitive claim on, yes, it's always good or not. But overall, this agreement is not bad. When I did my audit back in 2019, I came across some that had pricing terms that were very vague. This one, the pricing is out there. These are essentially commodities, the specs. You could easily go out there. So from that respect, it's not bad at all. In total, I had 2 observations, which were both priority 3 observations, which I'll get into next. So the first one is the main one dealing with pricing. So like I said, the pricing is not bad, but the agreement does allow us the opportunity to request additional bulk pricing discounts. But what we're doing is when we go to the website and make our purchases, we're making our purchases as is. We don't negotiate bulk discounts. We don't price shop to see if there's something cheaper out there. we just purchase it from the website as is. And the website, like I said, from what I found, it's not bad, but there could be opportunities to save some money, possibly if we just do a little bit more legwork, depending on obviously the criteria we establish. So if you, for example, you pick up $50,000, so after $50,000, you need to do a little bit more legwork before purchasing things of that nature. As an example. So the recommendation is to first, when we make our purchases, verify that the minimum discounts are being received, and all those are posted in the agreement. So laptops, monitors for different categories, they have different minimum discounts. So just verify that we're in fact getting them. And from my test work, we received them from all the things we purchased. And then lastly is talking about establishing those additional due diligence considerations. At which point are we going to do just a little bit more legwork prior to going with Dell? I mean, worst case, the Dell Premier prices are out there and known. So I mean, worst case, we could just go back and make the purchase that's already there. Best case, we save some money. So that's the first one. The second one was kind of accounting related. We made some purchases of laptops during COVID time due to the need of telecommuting. And so when we recorded these laptops, we recorded them to a general supplies category versus a computer related account. So it's already been reclassed, but that was one issue. Secondly, when you purchase anything with a screen on it, laptop, tablet, monitor, obviously, Dell assesses an environmental fee, and so, but those fees are not taxable. But when we calculated our total tax due for the purchases, we included that in our tax base. So we overpaid slightly on our taxes by including those small fees into the total tax base. So the recommendation was to reclassify the miscoded laptops, which we did. And then secondly, to exclude environmental fees from the use tax calculation when we make our purchases, and which they also said they would do. That pretty much concludes my presentation. We also have representatives from Information Services, Jason Miller, Assistant Chief Information Officer, present if you guys have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salim. Questions from my committee members? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Salim, first off, thank you very much for the presentation.
Chair Amirian?
Yes, Mr. Khashidorian.
Sorry, my mic was on mute, so probably you didn't hear
No
me.
worries.
I had a couple of quick comments and questions.
No worries. Go ahead, please.
I apologize. Okay. Thank you very, very much, Mr. Salim. Now I wanted to go back to the presentation. One of the things that you put there is like, this comparing the value to price. Value, in my opinion, is always an elusive concept because price is part of the value. No questions about that. Of course, value is more of a long-term concept. You look at, I don't know, the products that you're buying. Do they have the quality? What is the condition for returns? Does the vendor provide post-purchase support? Are there any upgrades? Is there an online support? So I think when we talk about value, like I think you also mentioned that price should be part of that value assessment, obviously.
Yeah.
So I looked at the number that you reported, the 666,000. Is that for a 5-year period?
No, that's just for that 9-month period that I looked at.
Oh, it's from the September.
From January to September 2020.
Okay. So we bought quite a few items, right? For 600,000.
I mean that's a kind of a subjective thing, but yeah.
I used an average price of $700, and I came up with like 950 units. Well, understanding that some monitors are cheaper, laptops are more expensive, so it could be 800-900. Do you know if Dell has a customer service rep that we directly work with them? If I'm not wrong, you mentioned that anytime you're making a purchase, we just go online and place the order?
Yeah.
Is that how it-
So generally that's how purchases are made through the website, but we do have Dell customer service representatives that we could also make purchases through.
do we have what I'm saying is that because, obviously we are a major client for Dell, can we ask them to appoint a specific customer service rep to help, with the negotiation and all of that, especially? I guess part of the question is that, do we make the purchases in one shot, or every other week we place an order for a few more laptops? How does that work? Can you help me understand this a little bit better?
So I'll let someone from ISD chime in, but just real quick, the purchases were made throughout the period, so it's not like just one big purchase. But I'll let Jason, are you there, Jason? Or maybe Armenia Jimenez, who's also from Information Services Department, maybe they could chime in.
I'll try to tackle those. Committee members, Jason Miller, I'm the Assistant Chief Information Officer. While I wasn't necessarily here during some of these purchases, yes, it's over a period of time, and typically they're bulk items. I think you did a calculation of $600 per device, and I know that's just as an average to kind of get a number together. But in the beginning of the year, obviously January to roughly May-ish, there was a tremendous amount of remote workers, and we needed to enable those folks to have laptops and things of that sort. So the gross majority of that was equipping our community or our staff to have the equipment at their homes or wherever they could work remotely in the organization. So sadly, during that time, we were doing everything we could just to get as many devices out to people as quickly as possible. While we may not have spent a whole lot of time negotiating, specialized pricing, there was bulk deals to buy a lot of laptops, and we did work with finance to do that, or purchasing to do that. So I think that answers the question.
Thank you, and just quick follow up on that. Are there any plans on when all of the staff is back, hopefully at some point in the near future? Are they going to? Is this going to be considered like a personal item or still property of the city of Glendale? And if so, then what is the plan in terms of storing them, or do you have any plans with what you're going to do with those laptops?
Yeah, so this was obviously a wake-up call to ISD and I think the city in general. Mobility and being able to work just about anywhere we needed to was not necessarily a part of the plan prior to the pandemic. But what we have adopted in the period since the pandemic and the closure of the city is kind of a single device policy. So if you or me, Jason Miller, has a desktop today and now have to work remote during the pandemic, we essentially recovered that desktop, assigned you the laptop, provided a docking station, and now you have a single device. It's going to be your laptop or your primary device. Thankfully, during the pandemic and those initial purchases, we tried to buy machines that met the specification to last the duration of 5 years. So that machine does become their one and only machine. And quite honestly, it adds a whole bunch of new opportunity for them to, number one, be remote, but also they have all of their content contained within their one machine, allowing them to be way more productive just about anywhere they need to be.
Thank you. And Mr. Salim, I just want to go back to my recommendation that it would be better to maybe ask Dell to provide a point person for all of the future purchases or to the IT department, simply because, as you know, many people are talking about the inflation picking up in the next few months, and then in the IT industry, chip makers are reporting really the costs are going up, and if this is a trend that is going to continue, I think there are some benefits to be materialized if you can work with a specific person that has the ability to offer us some good pricing on some of these products. Because again, we are a volume buyer, and that's, I think, it's a right of the city to be able to negotiate a better price.
Thank you for bringing that up. We do have an assigned account manager. His name is Perry Vu. He's been with the city for many, many years at this point. Since the 2015 contract negotiation, we've had a dedicated Dell support team, not just from a desktop perspective, but across their whole enterprise suite of products, servers and storage, and just everything ISD related. So we do have a complete Dell team that supports this in the background, and we do meet with them regularly to find out opportunities from a discount perspective, and obviously what things are available, and that's been critical to our success over the last year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hashidurian. Mr. Parahone, any questions?
Yeah, I had a question. So when you guys purchase all these laptops, obviously in bulk quantities, does Dell already pretty much preload them with all the software they need for safety purposes, security measures on it, GPS, anything like that, or in case they get lost or stolen?
Unfortunately, and this is Jason Miller. Unfortunately, we don't allow them to install our software. They do asset tag each one of the devices specifically to our needs. But once we do receive that device, we have a process internally that basically images each one of the machines to be identical. So all the software necessary for an individual that needs to use the system is available for them almost immediately. The process is pretty streamlined, and quite honestly, that's some of the value we find in buying a specific vendor, because we know we kind of have the drivers and everything ready to deploy that in the event of a bulk receive of equipment.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds great.
Thank you, Mr. Parahone. Mr. Salim, thank you for your presentation. You anticipated several of my questions. I do have a couple of follow-ups. In terms of the cooperative agreement, you mentioned that you didn't really want to comment on intent, but I'm curious, did you look into what the benefit actually was to the state of Minnesota for taking the lead on this versus what it cost them in terms of time, man hours?
So the administrative fees that these cooperative agreements afford the lead agencies are stated to account for the administrative time and all that that goes into developing them. But that's all documentation on there, and like I wouldn't have visibility into how much was actually made and things like that on their end.
Okay, thank you. And then in terms of, I imagine, following up on what Mr. Hashidurian was saying, I imagine that there's been substantial policy created since the beginning of the pandemic in terms of, the use of any city property and devices that are assigned to somebody that's remotely working. And I also imagine there are considerations in terms of what's public and what becomes public if you work on a specific device. So I'm fairly confident that the city is ensuring that the employees understand that is city property, and that the work that they do on that is potentially public, to avoid any issues where they're conflating personal work with public work. In terms of your observation and best pricing, for any of these purchases that you audited, the 15 invoices that represented almost 90% of the total, was there any reaching out to Dell in terms of asking them for a discount based on the purchases? Or was that simply just ordered from the website?
So all of my samples, those were that's a tough one because I'm just thinking. So because of what I've done is, first of all is we had our purchases made during the sample period, in which I have my invoice, and then I'm checking to make sure it was recorded. That was one aspect. The second aspect was determining the price, if it was, but to determine that, I used current model equivalents. So if I wouldn't have the visibility at that time. Was this a negotiated price or not? But I did have, obviously verbally, just through my communication, is we generally purchase things through the website as is, and we don't want our let's say lower level staff in ISD to be trying to negotiate pricing discounts on the city's behalf. That's generally the policy right now.
Understood, thank you. And maybe this is a question for Mr. Miller. You know, when we're talking about 15 invoices that total, you know, almost 600,000 of the 660,000 total, how many of, I mean, those are on average fairly large invoices. In how many of those instances did the person who was making that purchase or assigned to make that purchase reach out to Dell to ensure that we got the best price available?
I'm not sure how to respond to that, only because I think some of those purchases were done before I joined the city. But I can say that in general, we do not negotiate price from an ISD perspective. Anytime we're trying to negotiate price, we send that through a requisition into purchasing to do a purchase. I do understand that the Dell contract does give us the opportunity to just purchase straight from the website. Often, I can tell you, we do meet with the account manager and discuss purchases prior to buying them, but I don't know that there's been any negotiation or that I'm aware of a better price.
Okay, and how many of these cooperative agreements is it a general part of these cooperative agreements that, you know, you can potentially negotiate price at the time of purchase, or is that just something that's specific to this one?
Can you repeat that one more time, please?
So I assume that the city is engaged in other cooperative agreements and makes purchases for other areas of the city needs from other cooperative agreements. Is the feature of being able to negotiate prices further a feature of cooperative agreements in general, or is that something that's specific to this particular cooperative agreement?
No, I've seen it before, and with other agreements as well. Now, are we actually negotiating for? I mean, the stated benefit of a cooperative agreement is that you're going to have this large purchasing power, because a lot of people are piggybacking off it, and as a result of that, they should already take the anticipated total purchases and reflect a discount accordingly. So that is the stated potential benefit. So you should be getting a reduced price. Are you? There's no way to know unless you actually check each one. The Dell contract, it definitely did offer lower pricing than the consumer side. Like I said, the only difference was when compared to another reseller, that we had some mixed results. But even then, there were times when it was cheaper and other times when it was slightly higher. But overall, this is not a bad cooperative agreement to use. My thing is that we could make use of it even better if we just do a little bit legwork, a little bit more legwork in some instances there. Now, the other cooperative agreements that the city uses, I mean, it would be very hard to say specifically without looking at it. But yes, we can negotiate further discounts. Are we? My guess would be, I don't know for certain, but I would be inclined to say for the most part we're purchasing as is, but I can't comment for certain without looking at it.
Chair Marion, this is Michelle Flynn, Finance Director. If I could chime in a little bit here too.
Yes, Ms. Flynn.
With regards to negotiating prices, we discourage the departments to do any of that sort of thing when they're making their purchases. And as Mr. Miller indicated, when generally the processes of a requisition is submitted and purchase orders, contracts are then issued once all the proper processes are in place and have been taken care of to set those instruments up to do the procurements. There should not be any negotiating done if you have a purchase agreement in place, whether that be a cooperative agreement, a purchase order, a contract, there's stated prices, specific equipment or services that are identified, and both parties should be complying with terms of those agreements. So,
And Ms. Flynn, I appreciate that, but even if the cooperative agreement allows for negotiation, that's the policy of the city that you don't negotiate those prices?
I was just going to say, in some cases with the cooperative agreements, they work a little differently, and they are more difficult to basically substantiate pricing. So then it's kind of on us to do whatever due diligence we can. And when I say us, I mean whoever's doing that purchase or working with the vendor to look at the terms of the agreement to see what we can do. As Mr. Miller indicated, specifically on these purchases, it's difficult to determine what those conversations, if any, were done, or if we just purchased off the website. It's hard to say. So the terms of cooperative agreements are difficult in some cases, and they're not as clear, and which is why our new policy on them is that those all need to go through purchasing here in finance before those get established for any procurements.
And thank you for that. I imagine, based upon my experience, that the culture in the city is to take, ownership of the funds that are used to make these purchases and to treat the taxpayers' money with care and a regard for, what the best prices can be, even if there is, a set-up purchasing agreement that makes it really easy to purchase a lot of things at a push of a button. So I imagine the culture of the city and led by you in finance is such that you are looking to make sure that you are realizing every potential cost savings for the city.
Chair Marianne, members of the committee, absolutely. Public procurement focus is on best price, period. There are times where best value is useful and appropriate, but the focus and the processes and the controls are built around best price. And that is because it is public money. Yes.
Excellent. I have no further questions on this. Thank you very much.
Chairman Amirian, may I interject? May I just make
Of
one more
course,
comment
Mr.
on that?
Khachaturian.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Ms. Flynn, I think the point of the negotiation is not necessarily always getting a better price. For example, if you're buying, product warranties or product support for 1 year or 2 years, we can always negotiate that at the same price. Dell can give us a more flexible option, maybe extend that. If you're not buying that post-purchase support, maybe they can offer that to us. So it's not necessarily changing the amount on the invoice. It's just, in my opinion, we have a leverage, and I think the city needs to be able to use that when appropriate. I mean, I understand that it's not always the case, but when appropriate, I think it's prudent for the city to consider this more seriously. Thank you.
Chair Marion, members of the committee, committee member Khachaturian, you're absolutely correct. Where the agreements allow for that, then it's appropriate, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Salim, for that presentation. Let's move on to the next audit report.
Okay. All right, so I'll jump into the next one. Yeah, everybody can see the PCI audit.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so my next audit is going to be the PCI Compliance Audit results from this last test period. As Jesse mentioned, a lot of this I covered before, but I think it'll be a good refresher, and especially if we have some new viewers online, I think it'll be good for them to see as well. So just I apologize and bear with me. So the payment card elements. So payment card industry, obviously it governs your credit card payments. And so these are the various elements within a credit card: your chip, your PAN, which is your personal account number, cardholder name, expiration dates, and then your 3 or 4-digit codes, depending on American Express or other credit cards, and then your magnetic strip. So those are the basic elements, and I'll cover them in further detail in additional slides. Who sets the standards? So all the major credit card companies together form the PCI Security Standards Council, and they come up with the standards of what's required. The two major acronyms, obviously PCI, Payment Card Industry, and Data Security Standards, DSS. So you'll be here. You'll hear those two terms a lot, obviously, when discussing PCI compliance. Why do we care about PCI? One, it's required. Secondly, you could have significant fines and penalties if you're found to be in non-compliance. We could have our ability to process payment cards revoked. And lastly, if there is a breach, the cost of that breach far outweighs any mitigation costs. I mean, the cost goes into easily into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on how many records are breached. Because you could just imagine just a giving credit monitoring service to thousands and thousands of users in a database costs so much. So mitigation cost towards mitigation is definitely a cost well spent. There are different compliance levels depending on how many credit card transactions you process in a year. City of Glendale is a level 2, meaning we process between 1 and 6 million transactions a year. A little caveat, last year, obviously due to COVID, our transaction levels went down, but our merchant bank told us that since these were not structural changes, meaning we didn't have businesses that went out of business or things that were permanently closed, we anticipate things to go back to normal after this is all over. They recommended that we stay a level 2 merchant. And now we'll get into those elements that I referred to before. Oh, actually, let me get into the 12 requirements. So these are the 12 requirements that are your kind of commonsensical goals and requirements that these DSS standards go by. I'm not going to read everything. We'll just go through the goals on the left-hand column. Build and maintain a secure network, protect cardholder data, maintain a vulnerability management program, implement strong access controls, regularly monitor and test networks, and then maintain an information security policy. And then if you just go to, like, for example, what does implement strong access control measures means? It means you restrict access to cardholder data on a business need-to-know basis. You assign unique ID to each person with computer access, and you restrict physical access to cardholder data. So those are, I mean, I think it's all pretty self-explanatory now. The actual when you get on the ground and kind of get in, it can get technical, but these are the goals and the objectives of these 12 requirements. So now we'll get into the elements. So from all these elements, the ones that are absolutely prohibited to keep are any chip holder data or the 3 or 4-digit codes. We can't, under any circumstance, keep this information in our servers or any paper or electronic form. Also the magnetic strip, sorry. And then generally, the personal account number, that is also prohibited unless it's encrypted. So like if you have these stored wallets, you know, Google Pay, Apple Pay, Amazon, the reason they have these, your information is because they have the required encryption that they're allowed to keep it, but generally it's prohibited unless you have that encryption. And what's allowed to keep is your cardholder name and expiration date. And we use, a lot of times businesses use these just for identification purposes next to each transaction. So why do we do all these audits? I mean, you must be thinking, we do these 3 times a year. Why do we do it? One is to demonstrate ongoing compliance. Secondly is to identify deficiencies timely. PCI, we have our formal audit that takes place at the end of the year, but we're required to be in compliance throughout the year. So doing these helps us identify and fix things as the quicker than just once a year that the formal audit does. And then preparation for the annual audit. And lastly, just raise awareness throughout the city that PCI is important. I mean, you'll be surprised just when I'm interviewing these people how aware they are now because of the number of times they're being asked about these questions. So that was background. So now we can jump into the specifics of the audit. Again, objective to determine the city's ongoing compliance with the PCI policies and procedures, and the scope based on the PCI DSS requirements as defined by the external qualified security assessor. The external security assessor is basically our external auditor that comes here at the end of the year and does the formal audit that passes or fails the city. Frequency, like Jesse mentioned earlier, we plan to do this 3 times a year. So February, May, and August, and these are the numbers associated with the various sites, systems, and tasks that we look at. These numbers will change, I mean, throughout the year, you know, as we add or remove some things, but it gives you a good idea of what's involved throughout the 3. And then obviously this current presentation is focusing on testing through February. The audit process, we conduct site visits, we perform system assessments, verified calendar events, and so those are the 3 things, and now I'll go into what are they. So what do we look for in sites? Sites are basically anywhere where you physically, there's a credit card terminal, but you give it's like more your face-to-face type of payments where you hand over your credit card and they process your payment, or over the telephone, things like that. That's what we refer to as sites. Systems is, like the picture implies, it's basically when you do stuff online or virtually, anything that's not a site, basically. And then when we refer to calendar tasks, this is an example of our yearly PCI task calendar. So it's basically just different tasks throughout the year that we have it just to make sure we're on top of things. And so what I do when I look at this, and I just so like if I just went through February, so I'll look at January and February, just make sure we completed these tasks in a timely manner, which is within the months that they were supposed to be completed in. So those are the tasks. The audit results. So we looked at 6 sites, we looked at 2 systems, and we looked at 12 calendar tasks. And we found one area of non-compliance, and that's with regard to one system, and that there's also one outstanding possible password-related issue that we're still following up. So that's going to be carried forward, and I'll present that in the next presentation as far as is it a finding or not. So the one finding we had was with regards to inactive users. So we found with one of the systems there were employees who were no longer with the city who still had access to the system. The system does not store credit card information, so it's not like there wasn't any credit card information for them to see. And also we checked, did they access the system after their termination date because they had access, and I didn't see that either. So nonetheless, we did provide the listing to the department, and they promptly deactivated the users. Audit is not the control to make sure that users are deactivated. That's a more management responsibility, but this is, I just wanted to highlight, this is one of the values we bring when we do this sort of user access testing, is that we were able to provide departments with a listing of users that they didn't deactivate and maybe wouldn't have known about otherwise if we didn't do it. So I think that's one of the good values of this as well. With that concludes my presentation, and I'll take any questions you may have. We also have Assistant City Treasurer Gia Murray available for any questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Questions from the committee members?
I have a quick question there.
Mr. Parhon.
The users that you guys have in the system,
Mhm.
is there like a auto password, where, how it is with our password, some systems where you have to change your password every 3 months or so like that? Does that have
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, we do.
I
We
know.
do. We do have system controls that require password changes at required intervals that we set, whatever we set by the city, and then if you come in after that point, the system won't let you log in unless you change your password.
And in this system, is it only, I guess the staff members can only access it at, I guess at work only, or now with them having laptops, they can access this anywhere? The software, I guess, or.
Yeah. Is Jason still on?
No.
No.
I'm at Armone's desk, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
Let me hold on. Sorry.
Let me get him back.
I'm sorry. I came in to meet Armone's
he's here.
machine.
Yeah. Sorry, Jason. This wasn't really your audit, but by chance, do you know if I'm assuming that people who have laptops and they're secured access to the system, that they could access these systems remotely if they have logon. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parhon. Mr. Khashidurian? Okay. He might be on mute. I'm going to give him a couple seconds.
Oh, sorry. No questions. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Mr. Khashidurian. I do not have any questions. Thank you, Mr. Salim. Thank you very much for that presentation. And let's move on, please.
All right, next section, section 2, is in progress projects. As of March 31st, 2021, there was one project in progress, and it's a planned audit, and Natalie is currently working on the phase 1 of this project, which is to conduct research on enterprise risk management framework and the staffing levels for the ERM and the risk management functions. So moving on to section number 3, continuous auditing. During this past quarter, we completed 2 user access control tests. Natalie worked on both projects. Both tests involve comparing Active Directory accounts and employees listing. So one is to make sure that only active employees have active AD accounts, and the other test is to make sure that all active employees have an active AD account. So the results from these 2 tests, along with recommendations, were provided to ISD for follow-up. So that is section 3. And again, the next 3 sections are all related to quarterly follow-up. Section 4 summarized the implementation status of the outstanding issues that internal auditor followed up on with department representatives. So for this past quarter, we have followed up with departments on 30 outstanding items from 9 completed audit projects, of which 7 were implemented. So there were 23 outstanding items at the end of the quarter. Section 5 is a summary of outstanding priority 1 issues. So there are 5 of the 23 were priority 1 issues that remain outstanding at the end of March 31st, 2021. And the last of these 3 follow-up sections is on the outstanding audit issues and meeting certain discussion criteria. So for the past quarter, there were 2 outstanding audit issues that entered into one of the 3 events categories. So specifically, 2 items from the Glendale Police Department property inventory audit have been open for more than 2 years. So the delay for both of these items is related to the new system that is being implemented, and which is delayed due to COVID-19. So we do have department representatives from GPD here today. So we, if you have any questions, so we have Police Civilian Division Commander, Ms. Cheryl Davis-Moore, and the Police Property Supervisor, Ms. Heather Howison, online, if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being with us. Any questions from my committee members regarding the GPD property inventory audit, 4A, B, and 5BC? Okay, the only question I have is when is the expectation that the Tiburon replacement will happen?
It's Heather Howison. At the moment, I believe we're expected to go live in the fall of this year, although we don't have an exact target date just yet.
And then can you just briefly describe what Tiburon is and why it's being replaced?
Sure, yeah, Tiburon it's our CAD RMS system that we use, like CAD being like incoming police calls, and then RMS is like our records management system. So it's what the department as a whole uses to manage basically everything incoming, and it's got a module that handles property inventory that we use in the property room. It's being replaced because it is outdated in a number of ways. We don't have support through the company for it anymore, and also there are some reporting capabilities that are going to be required for some recent law changes that it's not able to accommodate. So we need to move into a system that's able to report these things in order to comply with the law changes.
Okay, excellent. And given that you're waiting for that, I imagine you're making sure that these recommendations are being evaluated during that period of time until the replacement begins?
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is, there's a few recommendations that we agree with, are things that we do want to improve on, but we can't fully address it until the new system is in place, and it wouldn't entirely make sense to change our procedures entirely in order to incorporate these suggestions into the new system, in order to just have to then do it again in a totally different way once we transfer into our new system.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's move to number 7 on this advisory services.
Right, so finally, the section number, last section, just provides a list of routine team assignment to 3 committees or teams participated by internal audit. No change here, so routine activities.
Excellent.
So,
Thank you. Have we had any oral communications come in since during the meeting?
no.
Okay. So let's move on to item number 7, please.
Item number 7, audit committee or staff comments.
I'll open the floor to staff. And to my fellow audit committee members.
Chairman Amirian, this is Ed Kashadurian. Just a quick comment, sort of a question I would like to ask. Do we have any update on selecting the 5th member, or, having council members nominate a 5th member to this committee? Since the fact that Mr. Saturian has been absent for an extended period of time, I believe we talked about this at least twice before, so I just wanted to see if there's an update on that.
Thank you, Mr. Khachadurian. I echo that question.
Chair
Mr.
Miriam,
Tatalian.
thank you, Chair Miriam, members of the committee. I'll do my best to answer it. I did have a conversation with our city manager earlier or late last week regarding this. He's aware of the concern. He's aware of the fact that we've had one individual who has not shown up to a number of meetings. He was going to be speaking with the council member who made that appointment and ask that a replacement be identified before the next meeting.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, and yeah, we've spoken about this. I know Mr. Parahone brought it up initially, and Mr. Khashdurian, I echo your concerns. It's important that we have 5 members so that we can have a full committee, have each council member's viewpoints potentially represented in terms of determining the direction in which audit goes. And also, there are situations that come up where committee members are unable to attend, and we need 3 members for a quorum. We've been, very fortunate to have dedicated and diligent members on the committee. And again, I have nothing bad to say about Mr. Saturian. I've spoken with him, in fact, regarding this issue, and he's expressed to me that he communicated his wish to be removed from the committee, and so we're just waiting for the committee to be full. And thank you, Mr. Tatalian, for providing us with that update. We look forward to welcoming our 5th member before our next meeting. Mr. Parahone, any comments?
No, I mean, this is an old issue. I mean, I thought we discussed this almost a year ago, and I thought it was already brought up at the table. And I think the assistant attorney also spoke about this, that they were going to take some action on this, but I guess nothing has happened yet.
And I can just offer some follow-up. This is Lucy Varpetian
Ms. Varpetian.
from the City Attorney's Office. I think perhaps the pandemic has caused some delay in the process, only because a council person has to meet with the individual, gain the confidence that the person will adequately represent, be present and be able to take on the responsibilities. And I think some of these meetings and the opportunity to have those types of meetings have caused a delay in the process. But it is something that we're aware of, and it is something that we discuss very regularly.
Thank you, Ms. Varpetian. I just would like to thank the staff and each of the pertinent city departments who took the time to respond to these audits and participate in these audits. It may seem like a dry thing, although audit does a great job of making it interesting, not only for us, but for the public. And I appreciate the care that goes into the manner in which you prepare these audit reports. Not only are you following best practices in terms of audit, but you're also anticipating what our questions and concerns might be and answering those proactively. So I just want to recognize that and thank you for that. And we're all looking forward to the city and the state and the country continuing to open up. And hopefully, by Independence Day, we will have some of our independence back. And if not all of it, if we have no further comments, let's move on to number 8.
Item number 8, new business.
Any new business from the committee members? Hearing none, let's move to item number 9, please.
Item number 9, adjournment.
Do I have a motion?
Move to adjourn. Yes. motion to adjourn.
Excellent.
Second.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.